How can the newest baseball metrics help you win your fantasy league? Well, let's ask Robert Orr, who created one of them. More on that on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast. Welcome, everybody, to the Sunday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast, brought to you by So Rare. Erik Halterman here with my guest today, Robert Orr of Baseball Prospectus and FTN Fantasy, and the creator of my favorite new baseball metric, SEAGER. More on that for the bulk of today's show. Also, we'll be getting to some Phillies because Robert, in addition to being very smart in his creation of baseball metrics, is very smart in his choice of his favorite team. He picked the one that is the best team in baseball this year. So, Robert, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, let's start with the headlines, as we always do. And we are going to start with a Phillies headline. So we're going to bookend the show with some Phillies talk. Hopefully this one doesn't turn out to be too much of a headline, but Ranger Suarez was hit by a comebacker early in his start last night and had to leave the game. So far, the news is not so bad. The x-rays came back negative and there's some swelling, so maybe he'll miss the start. But man, this got to feel like a bullet dodge for Phillies fans and anyone with Ranger Suarez on their team, because what a season he's been having.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was generally the theme of all the quotes yesterday, and he seemed to be in good spirits. I read that he hid underneath of a table in the locker room and surprised the reporters after the game, so that seems like a good sign as far as how he's feeling.
Yeah, well, normally hiding under the table and feeling good may not be linked, but I think in this case, yes, I think that's a good point. So would lean towards Suarez being fine. I guess if you are someone who has Spencer Turnbull on a roster and haven't dropped him yet, maybe hold him through this weekend just in case. I mean, we assume he's going to come back and play a role at some point, but we also hope that it's going to be for Taijuan Walker and not for Ranger Suarez.
Yeah, they're going to keep going with this Taijuan Walker thing as long as they have to.
Seems like it. Elsewhere in pitcher news yesterday, Reed Detmers was optioned, and this is probably much more significant news than the Ranger Suarez news, which again, hopefully is going to be at most one missed start. But Reed Detmers optioned after a bad start, and if you look at his surface stats, seems pretty darn reasonable. 12 starts for Reed Detmers, a 6.14 ERA, and a 1.48 WHIP. But I would imagine you don't have to dig too far under that to be a little bit confused by this move. So what do you think is going on here? Do you think this is a sensible move and Detmers does need some time to go sort things out? Or do you think this is very strange and maybe surface time manipulation and I don't know what's going on here?
I don't think it's anything nefarious like that. I think it's maybe that organization's a little reactionary. I know he's got off to a really great start this year, and it just seems like he's been shelled every start since then. So maybe it's like a little quick reset because, yeah, I mean, his numbers, everything that tells us a pitcher is good pretty much says, hey, this guy should be pretty good. But who knows?
Yeah, but man, looking at his game log and his earned runs, which is, not something that we look at right away when we analyze pitchers, but it does actually matter just a little bit when it comes to who's going to win the game. Detmers' first 4 starts, 1-1-0-1 in earned runs, but since then, 4-5-7, 6-4, 6-3-5. So if you do that for that many starts in a row, this is going to happen. But I think I'm with you on I'm sensing no long-term reason to be worried about Detmers, but I guess it does leave people in a tough decision if you have him in a deeper fantasy league. Would you be holding on to him and assuming we're going to see him soon and you'll get the guy you drafted, or is this time to cut bait?
Yeah, I would hang on to him for a little bit. Just because we've seen the upsides is pretty good. And like you look at his game logs again, something not everyone looks at all the time is left on base percentage. And if you look at like the first 4 starts, it's 80%, 75%, 100%, 75%. And like league average, I think, is around 70, 71%. And then everyone after that is like below 50%. So every runner that's getting on is scoring. And some of that is a little bit of skill, but a lot of that is bad luck, I think. And relievers coming in and allowing inherited runners to score and that kind of thing. So that tends to usually work itself out.
Yeah, maybe they'll send him down, and then when he comes back up, the bullpen will be better, and he will have a better left on base rate, and we'll count him as a better pitcher. Speaking of Angels bullpen, they did recall Ben Joyce, the very exciting fireballer. Just got the call just today, just before the show. I'm not sure if we're anticipating him moving to the back of the bullpen immediately and picking up saves, but maybe for the deeper leagues, worth throwing that name out there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he got a lot of hype in college because I think he was at Tennessee, if I remember right. He was touching like 104, 105 miles an hour sometimes. And it's not like the guys at the back end of that pen have been lighting the world on fire. Carlos Estevez is like in a permanent state of shakiness. So, yeah, I mean, maybe if Joyce comes up and has a good few weeks, he starts getting those higher leverage opportunities eventually.
Yeah, when ex-Philly Luis Garcia is getting the occasional save chance and not necessarily looking all that different than he did when he was a Philly back in the darkest days of Phillies baseball, things aren't going great. Elsewhere in the headlines yesterday, we got a couple injuries to some not exactly superstar hitters. Vaughn Grissom hit the injured list with a hamstring strain. What do you think this does for the Boston infield? Is there any fantasy goodness we should be looking at? I mean, mostly I'm seeing less competition for David Hamilton and Manuel Valdez. Do I need to get excited there?
And Manuel Valdez has looked okay in brief stints before, but that's like really just super deep league, I think, because he's got a platoon and we're not really sure if he's that good. I think he had a 2 home run game recently, didn't he? But other than that, I don't think there's a lot to get excited about here.
Yeah, and not a lot to get excited about is probably the takeaway for the other injury here. Andrew Benintendi, he is now on the injured list with Achilles tendonitis, which seems like the kind of thing which could potentially keep him out for a while. Although our note does indicate the fact that it's listed as tendonitis rather than a strain is a positive. So maybe it's not that long. At this point, I'm not sure how many listeners would have Andrew Benintendi on any of their teams. Although I think I picked him up at one point and quickly dropped him in one league. So the playing time mattered for Benintendi, and he doesn't have that anymore. So there's now some playing time in the White Sox outfield for Corey Julks, Dominic Fletcher, Oscar Colas. You taking any shots at any White Sox this weekend?
It'd have to be in a pretty bad way to want to, but I don't know. Oscar Colas has been interesting at times before, and it looks like he actually cut his strikeout rate a little bit in AAA this year. It's under 20%, which is that's a pretty big deal for him. We know he can hit the ball very hard. Julks looks pretty competent at times last year in Houston. But it's hard to figure out which one of them is going to get most of that run. It's kind of like take your best guess, I guess.
Yeah, Julks seems already maybe viable as a deep league compiler types if he's going to play a lot. Looks like he can do some of everything and not hurt you. Colas, that's an interesting shout about his decreased strikeout rate coming down a few points, and it's worth remembering with guys like Colas, when there are players who we were somewhat excited about a year and a half ago, we shouldn't forget those guys because the reasons we liked them a year and a half ago, most of them still apply. We've learned some of them may have been overstated, but in general, outdated scouting reports are still mostly right. And so if it just took a year and a half for him to sort things out, now should also mention his overall slash line in AAA only equates to a 97 WRC plus. So I don't want to be getting ahead of myself here, but you're right to mention that he's somebody and he's doing something in the right direction, and maybe there's some playing time.
Yeah, that talent's there somewhere. We liked him for the power speed before, so that presumably that's not gone away entirely at age 25. So maybe just a little improvement somewhere. Maybe he becomes relevant.
Yeah, so keep him in mind for your deeper leagues. Also, speaking of talent, wanted to mention Royce Lewis. He is expected back Tuesday, so if you have him in any of your lineups, can presumably plan on him returning then. I don't think he's likely to suffer a setback before Tuesday. You never know. There was the interesting story where he attempted a steal on rehab, and the team freaked out about it. I don't know if that bodes well for my confidence in him going forward. Obviously, if you have him somewhere, the news that he's coming back is very exciting and you're plugging him right back into the lineup. But if we're at a place where the team's not even trusting him to run, I don't know how I feel about his overall health right now.
Yeah, or his fantasy value if he's just like being forbidden for running on the bases. I mean, the bat's potentially special we've seen, so he still could be like an extremely good, like, I don't know, Jordan Light type of thing if he ever put together a run of games. But yeah, I mean, just not sure what we're getting on the bases or like how often he's even going to play. I could see him sitting, 1 or 2 games a week, trying to keep him on his feet. I don't know. I don't have him anywhere, but I did have some FOMO at the start of the year about missing out on him. But I don't know. We'll see what he looks like when he comes back.
Yeah, that FOMO lasted less than a full game before he got hurt for the first time. So hopefully he can make it at least 2 games this time around. Hopefully a whole lot more than that. That's going to do it for our headline portion of today's show. So I want to move us on to the main topic, which is Robert's new invention. What's the right word? What do you do with a stat? Design? Create? I don't know. But your award-winning stumbling into SEAGER.
There you go.
Won you what was the award from Saber for best contemporary something or other? Very high honor that I should have remembered the exact details of before launching into this sentence. But the point is, what you've done here is created, I think, one of the more significant metrics that I've seen in recent years, and it seems like Saber agrees. Saber Award for Contemporary Baseball Analysis. There you go, to give you your proper title. And SEAGER is, to give the 1-sentence description of it before I turn it over to you for a 1-minute description. It's a stat which tracks how good a player's swing decisions are. Basically, do you swing at strikes and take balls? But there's more to it than that. So why don't you tell me a little bit more about what goes into SEAGER and how useful you think it is and why you decided to create it and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I guess to start off with just what it is a swing decisions metric, and it's not just tracking, chase percentage or, how much you're chasing out of the zone and that kind of thing, because that doesn't actually track too well with quality of contact, which is something that we're after as, analysts and fantasy players. We want those guys that, like, we want to figure out which guys are going to be able to impact the ball and get consistent playing time that way and gives our home runs and everything. And like O-swing doesn't actually correlate too well with it. So I was trying to figure out a way to measure that. And last year, there's a lot of articles about Corey Seager coming out, how he has like this unique approach where, he doesn't let anything go by him in the zone at all. But he also doesn't chase too much. So it's like he's balancing both of them very well. And Seager attempts to put a number on how well a hitter does that. How well are they balancing hitting the pitches they can and also not getting themselves out or turning down opportunities to get on base if a pitcher's not giving them anything to hit, basically. So it's selective aggression is kind of what the moniker stands for a little bit. I didn't come up with the name. Corey Seager was the inspiration, but I had no name for this, and the people at Baseball Prospectus kind of retrofitted an acronym for it.
In the best baseball tradition, of course, all great baseball stats are retrofitted acronyms to some player or other, and at least this one gets to be retrofitted after a star player, unlike some of the other acronyms we've seen out there. But this year, if you were to create SEAGER this year, who would they have had to name it after? Edmundo Sosa or something?
Yeah, possibly. And he's quite a story because he was actually like one of the very, very worst players at it last year. So, obviously I watch him a lot this year. Like the quality of his at bats is completely different. It's really interesting. I might have to write about it soon if one of the Phillies beats doesn't beat me to it.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to that. So we're going to be taking a look at some leaderboards of players who are doing well in SEAGER or doing poorly in SEAGER and doing well or poorly in terms of their results to try to see if we can find maybe some potential future risers or future fallers, or maybe we can learn a little bit more about SEAGER and discover that, hey, as useful as it is, it's not everything. There are other stats that explain a good player. So try to get a sense on just how explanatory it is, how powerful it is. But also, Robert, where can people find SEAGER?
So if you go to my Twitter, which this is a really bad way to tell people how to find it, then I have it in my, I think it's either in my bio or my pinned tweet. But I have a Shiny app that I update every day that tracks that. You can find it. And also, it should be coming to Baseball Prospectus leaderboards sometime this year.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah,
is that breaking news, or is that already known? I don't know. Are we breaking news here on this podcast?
People have been asking for a while. We're working on it right now, getting it up there. But that's a little bit of breaking news, I guess.
Very. So until that point, listeners can go to your Twitter. It's at @NotTheBobbyOrr, which is a good Twitter handle, and you can find in your pinned tweet, or you can go to your Shiny app, which is called The Realist Muto, which is also a good name as well. So we're going to get into some of these leaderboards, or who is showing great swing decisions and how much should we care, right after this message from our sponsor, So Rare. Have you ever dreamed of stepping into the shoes of a general manager? Welcome to So Rare MLB, a groundbreaking fantasy baseball game where you call the shots. Take charge and make your managerial mark by collecting officially licensed digital player cards of your favorite MLB stars. These aren't just any cards, they're your ticket to compete for over $1 million in total cash rewards and other amazing prizes. Imagine winning VIP trips to the MLB All-Star Game 2024 or getting your hands on signed merchandise from top MLB players. Here's how it works. Use your cards to set your lineup each game week. Real-world plays like hits, strikeouts, and homers will power your team's performance. Climb the leaderboards and snag weekly wins, from cash prizes to more cards and unforgettable experiences. But there's more. Build an iconic collection of your favorite teams and players to unlock gameplay bonuses and exclusive rewards. The rarer the card, the higher your score, and the bigger your edge in competitions. And when you're ready to trade, the So Rare Marketplace offers a vibrant community of managers. Engage in live auctions, make instant buys, or trade cards peer-to-peer. Starting is absolutely free. Draft your first team of common cards today and feel the thrill of competition as you climb the ranks to baseball mastery. What are you waiting for? Join So Rare MLB today. Transform your passion for baseball into a quest for glory and get rewarded for your baseball savvy. Sign up today with a link in the description and get 50% off your first pro cards up to $50. It's your passion rewarded. Welcome back, everybody, to the Sunday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by So Rare. Erik Halterman with my guest, Robert Orr, today, and we are talking about his new metric created last year called SEAGER, which measures a player's swing decisions. And if I am able to pull up my slides here, or my Google Sheet, there we go. For everybody following along on YouTube, I have just posted a list of the players who are doing great in both SEAGER and in their offensive results this season. This list of players, I believe, has a WRC plus of at least 130, and they're in at least the top 15 percentile in SEAGER. I'll just read off the list for anybody not able to catch on YouTube. This is an example of the hitters that make excellent swing decisions and have excellent results. And there's some really good names in here mixed in with some interesting pop-up names. Marcell Ozuna, Davis Schneider, Christian Walker, William Contreras, Kyle Tucker, Edmundo Sosa, Aaron Judge, Vladimir Guerrero, Dylan Moore, David Fry, Bobby Witt, Joey Ortiz, Juan Soto, Rhys Hoskins, Shohei Ohtani, Gunnar Henderson, Bryce Harper, and Mookie Betts. So, man, if you were to give me a list of the best hitters in baseball and also David Fry, Dylan Moore, and David Schneider, that would look a lot like that.
Yeah, excuse me, sorry. Yeah, these are mostly when you think of the guys who are consistently doing the best at the plate. This is a lot of the names that come to mind. And then also, like you said, the incredible season of David Fry is popping up here, and kind of last season's David Fry might have been David Schneider, and he is also here. Yeah, these are guys who they're doing what you want. They're making the best decisions at the plate. They're being rewarded for it.
And so something I'm curious here is how much can we read into a third of a season worth of SEAGER? So when I see that most of these players are the types of hitters that I would expect to be having great seasons and showing good plate discipline. I mean, Juan Soto, for example, probably epitomizes that. I guess he's only 91st percentile in SEAGER, but hey, Aaron Judge, he epitomizes that too. Kyle Tucker, 98th percentile SEAGER, having the best season of his career. So when we see that those guys make this number make sense in a lot of ways, if we also see the David Frys, the Davis Schneiders making that level of swing decision for 2 months, what does that tell us about the type of swing decisions they're going to make the next 2 months?
So yeah, it is something a guy can be streaky at. Like they can run hot, be seeing the ball very well. I've done a little bit of like the stability or reliability testing. Still working on that. That's one of the reasons it's not quite on Baseball Prospectus yet, but it does take a little bit longer to stabilize than other metrics because there's a lot going into it. There's two different parts. It's selective aggression and then hittable pitches taken, and those are two different like behaviors that a hitter exhibits. You have to wait for both of them to stabilize. So I found that like around 80 to 100 plate appearances, you can start to assume that what a player is doing is more them than the rest of the league. So you can, if they're doing considerably better than the league average, you can think, okay, they're just doing the right things. They might still regress towards the league average, but they are displaying an improved skill there. So I don't know if I would bet on Edmundo Sosa to lead the league in swing decisions for the rest of the season, but I would say that he has definitely made a significant jump forward. I think David Fry also, I think he was okay at this last year, but like this is an entirely new level. So again, I don't know if I would expect him to make, Juan Soto-esque decisions at the plate all year, but I think that you can bet on that skill at least being one of his standout attributes the rest of the year.
Yeah, and for me, I think that the power SEAGER has here is that when we see these guys who have had a pop-up 2 months, you want to see at least one underlying number that goes with it, and ideally many. And so if we see with some of these guys having these exciting seasons out of nowhere that, oh, they're hitting the ball hard and they're making more contact, those are good things to see. And this is another one in that realm where it doesn't necessarily guarantee, right? If we see a player having his best average exit velocity in these first 2 months of his career, that's really good, right? If he's had a hot 2 months, we really want to know that he is also hitting the ball harder. Similarly, we really want to know that he's also making better swing decisions. So I think it definitely matters, although like you said, that's not a guarantee that he's going to stay like that. But man, if you had told me that David Fry, he's having this outstanding season and he's making the worst swing decisions of his career, I think that would be a very different story. So even if this is no guarantee that David Fry in June and July is amazing, it really does back up the idea that David Fry is earning a lot of what he's done so far.
Yeah, it's telling you he's got good processes going into what he's doing. It's not like just fluking it, basically. He's consistently doing the right things, and I think that's the big takeaway there.
Do you have any thoughts on these guys who are truly at the elite end of this scale, like, say, a Davis Schneider, who's all the way up at the 99th percentile, versus the guys who are merely quite good? I mean, the guys in the upper 80s. Does it tell you something extra if you're way at the top in SEAGER, or does it tell you, okay, that was 2 months, you'll probably fall down to the 90th percentile?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's like a huge you can take anything away from there being like big outliers. Like last year over the full season, I think Corey Seager was number one, and he had a SEAGER of like 25 something, if I remember right. And then like second and third place was like 23, 22. There's not a huge spread. So I don't think there's a really big difference at the top end. I think it's more moving away from around the league average that tells you something.
That would make sense to me. Also, before we move on to the next list, you mentioned SEAGER was up around 25 in SEAGER. What does that 25 mean? It's not 25 runs added or anything like that. It's just a score, because that's why I've chosen to display it alongside the percentile here for added context.
Right. I've wrestled with this because it's kind of bad math in the way that OPS is, where you have different denominators going into one number. So technically, it's a comparison of the number of the amount of your correct decisions that are takes, and then you subtract away the amount of hittable pitches that you are taking, and it's kind of like approximating. You see people doing like zone swing minus chase rate. It's kind of like approximating that structure a little bit. But yeah, you're subtracting those two numbers and coming away with a score. And it's kind of like a rate basis kind of thing, but it's also different denominators for those two things. So you can't technically call it that.
Got
So,
it. So it works, even though there are some interesting bits when you get down there. Got it. So let's move to the next list here, which is bad SEAGER, bad results. And I don't think we need to linger too long here because this is mostly just showing the other side of the coin and showing that, hey, a lot of the worst hitters in baseball make bad swing decisions, and those two things are related. The list here is quite long, and I don't want to read every single one of them, but at the very bottom, you'll see names like Nick Ahmed and Martin Maldonado and Dominic Smith. I think nobody's surprised. There are some interesting names on here, though. There was a question somebody in chat wants to know, Alex wants to know, what do you guys think of Encarnacion Strand? Well, Christian Encarnacion Strand was really struggling and only 12th percentile in SEAGER. So that's not great. Obviously, there were other things going on with his season. But when you see a talented, highly hyped young player showing up this bad in SEAGER, am I right to be worried?
Yeah, and the interesting thing with him is that last year, I'm pulling it up right now, he was quite good. He was in the 77th percentile in his limited sample last year. So
interesting.
And he's always had a reputation as a free swinger in the minors. That was the big knock on him as a prospect, but somebody with a ton of power. So he was able to mask that a little bit. But if you're chasing a lot and you kind of like take and nudge those decisions just a little bit more in the wrong direction, then that can have considerably that could really hurt your overall production in a way that we've seen with him this year. I just think that's kind of being reflected in the numbers here.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. There's some other names on here that are potentially worrisome or potentially just explaining why a guy's having such a bad year. Bo Naylor in the 9th percentile in SEAGER. That's not good if you were hoping he would take a step forward. Brett Beatty, also 9th percentile. So some young guys who are struggling, and this certainly seems to be a real part of the reason why.
Yeah, I definitely think there's like some approach issues going on with Brett Beatty. There's been a lot of different stuff I've read about whether he should be like trying to pull the ball in the air or hitting it the other way, and those influence the pitches you swing at and what you're looking for and that kind of thing. So like if his approach is, if he's getting told different things and getting tugged at different in different directions by his organization and coaches, then that's going to show up in something like this, which is telling you what basically his thought process is at the plate. And I think that's shows a pretty good chunk of why he was sent down and having such a bad season.
Is this something you've noticed? Are there team-wide shifts in SEAGER? Have you noticed from year to year where this is a way we could tell, hey, it looks like the Rays are telling their hitters to chase less or whatever it might be? Do you notice things like that in the team-wide data here?
Yeah, I haven't checked this year, but I know the Royals rated really well for a long time. Yeah, they are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They're 8th. They were like 3rd best for a little bit there, and I think they rate quite well in barrel rate, if I remember right. Last time I was looking at the Savant leaderboard, so I think they are. There's a concentrated effort by them to attack pitches in the zone a little bit more this year. I would guess that like their swing rate on pitches has gone up. Like good pitches in the zone has gone up a little bit this year.
Interesting. So I wonder if there's going to be some future applications of SEAGER where we think about a player who's switching teams. If we can measurably say, hey, the Royals are really good at teaching aggression within the zone. Hey, look at this player. He's okay, but he's not aggressive enough in the zone. I'm just spitballing here. I don't know any actual examples of this, but I can imagine in some transaction analysis next offseason, just in the same way we're talking about, hey, this team's pitching coaches are really good at getting their guys to add a sweeper. Oh, this pitcher looks like he needs a sweeper. Oh, I'm pretty excited that he just went there. I mean, is this the kind of thing that you think we could do with Seager and say, look, this is the team's approach and he needs that approach, so get excited?
Yeah, I think, it's not gonna hit 100% of the time because it's such a complicated process going into teaching a hitter how to hit, basically,
right.
Or just changing their identity and their ability to recognize pitches and that sort of thing. But I mean, we've seen like teams like Atlanta have success just like picking guys off the scrap heap, and suddenly they're, Orlando Arcia starting an all-star game last year, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think there definitely is potential for it to be used.
Speaking of Atlanta, one more name on this bad Seager, bad results leaderboard before I want to move on to the potential improvers or potential fallers. We'll see. Michael Harris shows up on here having quite bad Seager, down in the 6th percentile, and he's having poor results this season. Does this stand out as checking out with Michael Harris's profile based on everything else we think, that he's a talented player but makes bad swing decisions? Is that where we sit on Harris?
Yeah, he is definitely one of the streakier free swinging types, and you'll see those at the bottom of these leaderboards. It tends to be the guys on either end of the extreme that Seager doesn't like. Either they're like extremely passive, Jack Sawinski type of hitter, or extremely aggressive like a Michael Harris. So yeah, he swings at everything, and that's pretty much the issue. Is if I look at the selectivity part of this, he is actually in the 1st percentile of the league. He is very, very bad at deciding what to not swing at, basically.
And that's really interesting, because you could sort of see that in a guy's strikeout and walk numbers, but you can't see it quite as well as you can with Seager. For example, with Michael Harris, for his career, he's a 21% strikeout rate, a 4.8% walk rate. So if you show me those numbers, I would say, okay, based on that walk rate, he's probably pretty swing happy. But I don't know if I would have been able to tell just how much. So that 1st percentile, what was that 1st percentile in swinging at pitches he shouldn't swing at, was it?
Yeah, the selectivity is like the takes portion of this. So he's like league worst in takes, basically.
Got it. And I should mention that I'm only displaying Seager, one of your many stats that's available over in your shiny app. The Realist Mucho selectivity is one of those, as well as a few other of the component parts. So highly recommend people checking that out. Let's move on to the good Seager bad results list. And this one is, I think, the most fun one, because there might be some potential buy lows here, or we might discover that Seager isn't everything. So I am going to read off the list of the players here. It's about 15. These are all guys who had a WRC plus below 90 and who were in at least the top quartile in Seager. So Chas McCormick, Jorge Polanco, Austin Riley, George Springer, Brendan Rodgers, Curtis Mead, Gleyber Torres, Emmanuel Rivera, Andrew Vaughn, Kevin Kiermaier, Joey Gallo, Santiago Espinal, Lawrence Butler, Mitch Garver, and Alejandro Kirk. So a whole bunch of names there who are not having good seasons, but who are at least choosing good pitches to swing at. So when I see, say, Chas McCormick's name at the top of the list, and I think about the fact that I was pretty in on him heading into this year, and it's not going well, should I say, oh, well, he's in 96th percentile in Seager, I think he's going to be totally fine, and hold on? Are we at that point with a stat like Seager, or do we think, all right, well, he's got to have some other flaws?
Yeah, that's a good question, one I'm wrestling with myself, because I think Chas McCormick was my most owned player this year, so I've been a little perplexed by this too. I know there was an injury component there, and now he's basically fighting for his job with Jake Myers going completely ballistic, and also John Singleton being relevant in 2024. Yeah, so I would take it generally as a positive, and that you would expect better. Like, we wouldn't expect him to have a 57 WRC plus all year, even if you don't think he's going to be 2023 Chas McCormick. But for a lot of these players, it's like, okay, there's good process happening here. They're doing the right things. I would expect them to improve, but also it's important to remember that for a lot of these, it's not just the decisions they make for hitters that determines their success. Like George Springer, you You're seeing his EVs, his exit velocities have declined quite a bit this year. So there might be some age-related decline happening physically. So maybe he's making the same good decisions he always has, but the rest of his game is starting to lag behind. And then a guy like Emmanuel Rivera, he actually rated really well if you drop the qualifications for it last year.
Wasn't he like top 5? He was insane.
Yeah. But for that, my takeaway was that might be what's keeping him in the league, because we know he can't really hit the ball too hard. But if he's consistently having a great at bat every time he goes up, that's what is keeping him, on a major league bench. Managers love that kind of guy. Come in and just never strike out, usually put a ball in play, and gives the pitcher a hell of a time, basically.
So I was going to ask you at some point today, and I think we've already touched on it, about Emmanuel Rivera specifically, because he was so elite last year. And do you think a guy with this outlier skill and nothing else, do you think that portends to future, not stardom, but, should I have seen that in a dynasty league and went and tried to go get Emmanuel Rivera because he's such an outlier in swing decisions that he's going to come good eventually? Or do you think there's a possibility of, like you said, you can actually be a one-tool guy where your one tool is plate discipline, but that's not going to get you anything more than a bench spot?
Yeah, it'll keep him in the league, but I don't think that would make him relevant in anything except for, a 30-team dynasty or something like that league, where it's just a ridiculously deep league. Because it's swing decisions. Yeah, swing decisions are very important for a hitter, but I think ultimately what would determine how good they can be, probably at the high end, is like their power potential, and he just does not have that.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. But say looking at this for someone like maybe Curtis Mead, who we've only seen in the big leagues for a little bit, we don't really have a full sense of how good he is. He struggled in his 94 plate appearances, but I think it's probably fair to say, okay, well, he at least had 84th percentile SEAGER. That's something when he comes back, if there's more well-rounded game. Maybe he's just Emmanuel Rivera, but I still definitely like to see it in a young hitter, I would think. I'm not sure if these 94 plate appearances are enough to conclude Curtis Mead has this skill, but if he was considered to have it, according to scouting reports too, that would be another thing where this is good to see. Just sort of builds a holistic picture of the player.
Yeah, exactly. And for him, I mean, he's displayed better high-end exit velocities than like a Emmanuel Rivera, or another name here is Santiago Espinal, which I think those are kind of roughly similar guys. But Mead can hit the ball a little bit harder and a little bit better than them. So this is more significant for him. I would say that, yeah, he's probably got at least as good of an upside as what like the prospect scouting reports had him down as, which I think was like generally thought of as like a typical professional hitter kind of thing. But so yeah, he should be able to do that. I think he's probably going to come in, and I would guess he'd be a pretty consistent offensive performer if he ever got an extended run. And he's just working out the kinks in his first run through the league, basically.
Yeah, unfortunately, SEAGER can't help us predict the future Rays depth chart, which will be an issue for Curtis Mead. But other than that, at least one good sign in his direction. Let's move to the bad SEAGER, but good results list. And by bad SEAGER, I did have to go all the way up to below average here, because there aren't actually very many players who are straight up bad in SEAGER, but have had good results. This is guys with a WRC plus of at least 130. Tristan Casas and Jake Myers, their SEAGER percentiles in the 40s, so maybe they're fine. And Jose Ramirez, actually, 38th percentile SEAGER, was a surprise. Rounding out this list, Kevin Pillar, Kerry Carpenter, Connor Wong, Mike Trout, you might have heard of him, Patrick Bailey, Jurickson Profar, Stephen Kwan, Michael Conforto, and Adley Rutschman. A couple interesting names on here, and I wonder if the takeaway is that we just shouldn't worry when we see an elite hitter like Jose Ramirez or Mike Trout having bad SEAGER. Should we just say, yeah, but those guys have proven that their approach worked for them, ignore that number?
Yeah, I would definitely trust the back of the baseball card when it comes to guys like that with a run. I think one thing you could take away from this list, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, a lot of these guys are on the more patient side of the ledger of hitters, and that is something that that SEAGER tends to underrate those kind of players. As you know, as a Phillies fan, I watch this a lot, and a guy who undoubtedly makes better swing decisions than he has in the past is Brandon Marsh, but actually SEAGER thinks he's making poor decisions. But what's happening is he's shrinking the hitting zone that he's looking for. So he's watching a lot of strikes go by, but when he does get the pitches in those zones, he's doing something with them, and that's a better approach for some hitters. This SEAGER doesn't explain everything. It's going to miss on some of those guys a little bit. I'm playing around, seeing if I can try to capture that a little bit better. But for now, it's just going to miss on that. Like a guy like Adley Rutschman, he takes very good, patient at bats. We know his bat to ball is extremely good, and he has good quality of contact. I would not take much away from SEAGER not liking him when we know he's Adley Rutschman.
Yes, and Adley Rutschman, I wanted to mention specifically. I'm just pulling up his past SEAGER numbers here because he has changed dramatically season to season, and I don't have any idea what to do about that. Adley Rutschman, in terms of percentile, as a rookie, he was in the 93rd, and then in his second year, he was in the 61st, and now this year he's in the 8th percentile in SEAGER. And we also saw with the Orioles, Gunnar Henderson. I haven't checked his SEAGER. I guess I could pull that up, but we saw that he went from a high walk guy to a very low walk guy, very aggressive swinger, and that totally worked for him. Is that maybe evidence of some team-wide shift here? Although I should note Gunnar Henderson this year, in SEAGER, he's at 86th percentile. Actually, he showed up on our list earlier, so I could have already known that. So he is becoming, I guess, more aggressive in a way that SEAGER likes, whereas Adley Rutschman is becoming more aggressive in a way that SEAGER doesn't like, but he's still having good results. And any idea what's going on there in Baltimore?
Yeah, well, you mentioned Gunnar, and I wanted to bring up that I had posted at some point. It might have been when he won the AL Rookie of the Year last year. A rolling plot of the hittable pitches taken part of SEAGER, which is basically that's what they're swinging at in the zone. And his improved dramatically as the year went on, to the point where at the end of the year, his overall SEAGER, if you just looked from after April or something on, it would have been an extremely good number, probably in line with what he's doing this year. With Adley, yeah, he's it looks like he's just the decisions in general kind of look worse this year, because he's not just watching or being more selective. He's also allowing a lot more pitches called strikes in the zone. So I'd have to dig into that a little bit more to see what's going on there. But yeah, I wouldn't base my opinion of Adley Rutschman on that, but
right.
It is interesting, and it's something I'd like to look at a little bit more.
Right, and that's what I'm trying to get at a little bit with today's episode, is when we see an outlier mark like that and everything else is fine, is that time to at least worry a little bit? Do you think that's accurate of we should make sure everything's okay here, or do we just write off the stat? Well, not the stat in general, of course. I wouldn't have had you on here if we write off the stat entirely, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think I would consider that would be a sign for me to dig into him more to see what's going on. And also something I noticed that his chase percentage has also gone up a fair amount this year. And I know I kind of poo-pooed on chase percentage when I was explaining why I went about making SEAGER, but I do like to see when they align in either direction. The guy has a bad SEAGER, bad chase percentage. That's usually okay, there's really something going on there. Yeah, and his has gone up this year, so he's making worse decisions in general. I guess that hasn't affected him too much in the triple slash, obviously.
It's the weirdest thing. His walk rate over the 3 seasons, 13.8, 13.4, and now 5.4. Yeah. But his OPS is identical, 806, 809, 806. So the new version of Adley Rutschman is the same version, despite being kind of different under the hood. I don't totally know what to do with it either, but it's worth a deeper dive, I think, in wherever it goes.
He's being more.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just to say he's being more aggressive in general. swing rate has gone from 40.5 to 41 to just under 47% this year, which is a pretty sizable jump for a hitter. So yeah, I wonder if he's hunting fastballs specifically or breakers specifically, and as a result is taking a lot more in the zone when it's not what he wants. I would hazard a guess that that's kind of what might be happening there, but I would definitely have to look into that a lot more.
Yeah, and we're seeing an increase in his hard hit rate to make up for a loss of walks, but so far those two changes are basically exactly canceling each other out. So maybe he will be able to combine the best version of himself and keep that higher hard hit rate and get his swing decisions back up and suddenly reach a new level. Not entirely sure. I've got one final leaderboard here, which is really just an excuse to throw Christopher Morel's name out there. I shouldn't pretend otherwise, but these players have mediocre results. I believe they're all between about 90 and 120 in WRC+, and they're all elite in SEAGER. They're all in the 91st percentile or better. And it's a really good list of names, even though it starts with Stuart Fairchild. But it gets really quickly to Christopher Morel, and then Nelson Velasquez, Joe Adele, Shea Langelier, Manny Machado, Ronald Acuna, Julio Rodriguez, still on here, interestingly, and Yandy Diaz. So the bottom of that list is some studs who are off to shaky starts, but who are still making excellent decisions. So that's good to see in the case of Machado, Rodriguez, Diaz, and if he weren't injured, Acuna. But the top five there, if we're, I guess, including Stuart Fairchild, maybe you have something to say there. He's a SEAGER god this season. But Morel, Nelson Velasquez, Joe Adele, and Shea Langelier all have been at least interesting. And the fact that all of them, I think, are very good power hitters. They hit the ball very hard and they make excellent swing decisions. That's a really good combination. I'm talking excellent swing decisions. All these guys are 96 percentile or better.
Yeah, and it's not this is like one of the more Christopher Morel is one of the more illustrative examples of the differences between what SEAGER's looking at and what the choice percentage or something is looking at. Like a lot of people think he's like a very free swinging type who just like almost because of the uniform and style he plays with, maybe it's like a little Javi Baez-ish clone, but he actually it's just like he's ultra aggressive within the zone. It's just that when he does swing, he's also ultra aggressive swinging and misses a lot of the time in the zone too. But yeah, what that does lead to is when he makes contact, it goes a very long ways, but it also, that's kind of like a streaky profile type to begin with when you're that kind of player.
Right.
But yeah, he's very aggressive. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say there's similarities too with Adele, right? I think you could say a lot of the same. He's had significant contact issues, but when he hits the ball, he hits it hard. So when you see specifically a younger player like that who does half of it right, they hit the ball hard, they just need to hit it more. If you see them swinging at better pitches, that's huge. If that sticks around, I mean, that would be the reason Joe Adele is a good player now, if assuming he's able to stick it out for the next 4 months. Is it that simple, right? If you can hit the ball hard, but you don't hit it that often, and at least now you're picking the right pitches to swing at, that can be what takes you from a bust to a completely viable player.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you could toss Velasquez into that bucket as well. You know, these guys who just make extremely good contact, and you just have like a marginal increase in the ability to make contact either by not swinging at pitches they have no chance at, or by punishing the ones that pitchers have to throw them basically to get it, into account. Then that's going to make a big difference. But it can make them into, all-star type players for a year, but also it kind of makes them they're walking a little bit of a tightrope there, because if you're so dependent on home runs for your production, then if you just get it a little bit worse again and those disappear, then you're back to being whatever, Nelson Velasquez was before.
Right.
I know he also Nelson Velasquez also, I was a little interested in him this year because he's been basically leading all year in the SEAGER rating, and I was like, what's going on? And then over the last week or two, he's just started popping home runs for fun. So I guess something finally clicked for him.
Yeah, I guess the one negative spin you could put on players like this is you could say that, well, if it takes truly elite swing decisions to get them to this level, are they going to maintain it forever? And that's why I'm excited to see where your stickiness analysis goes with this, year to year and month to month. I think that's going to be a really big piece to add to the puzzle here, because I really want to know, okay, Joe Adell is making outstanding swing decisions this year. So is the truth that he's making outstanding swing decisions now and going forward, and therefore Joe Adell is good? Or is the truth that he's running hot for 2 months? He's seeing the ball well, and I don't know if he's going to see the ball next month. And actually, this is reason to sell high. So I guess probably we should leave that question open until you've completed your analysis on just how sticky SEAGER is year to year, or do you think you are leaning in one direction on that?
Yeah. So in the introductory piece, I guess I would call it, I did have a little box showing like the correlation between SEAGER, chase, and zone swing minus chase with other statistics, and then also with themselves. And that's very surface level analysis. It's not as deep into the stickiness as what I'm planning on getting out there, but it did show up that it was a little less sticky than chase and zone minus swing. If you want like the actual correlation numbers, it's 0.82 for chase with itself and then 0.66 with SEAGER with itself. So it's still fairly sticky, but it's definitely less, or it's more prone to being variable between seasons. So yeah, it does come and go. Guys can run hot, can run cold. But yeah, there's definitely more research to be done into that avenue for what it is.
Well, I'm excited to see where that research goes. That's going to wrap up our discussion of SEAGER. I want to ask you real quick about the new swing speed metrics coming out. We don't have much time for that. I also want to talk to you about the Phillies, but here is a quick message from our sponsor, Prize Picks, before we get to that. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country. Prize Picks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and enormous selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. And hey, you can use the RotoWire Picks tool for help in making your picks. We've got advice on every game: NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, WNBA, soccer. Looking at just tonight's Phillies-Cardinals game, looks like our tool is saying pick the more on Nick Castellanos' hits plus runs plus RBI. I can get behind that. Pick the more on Kyle Schwarber's fantasy score. I can get behind that too. Pick the less on Taijuan Walker's strikeouts. I can probably get behind that one as well. Download the app today and use code ROTOPOD for a first deposit match up to $100. That's promo code ROTOPOD for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And welcome back to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, talking with Robert Orr about how to use new stats. That's the topic today. Mostly we were talking about his new stat, SEAGER, which he released last year, and which you can find at therealistmuto.shinyapps.io, or you can go to his Twitter account at NotTheBobbyOrr and find it under his pinned tweet there. Speaking of new stats, though, the one that has caught the baseball world by storm over the past month or so is all of the swing speed, bat tracking stuff. And we know it's very exciting and very cool and descriptive and leads to very cool visualizations. I love all the graphs and all the charts that I'm seeing about it. But the question, I think, for this podcast is how useful is it for fantasy players? There's some obvious wrong turns, which is just, hey, this guy swings hard, he's good. And then you get to Giancarlo Stanton as the best hitter in baseball, which probably isn't true. And Luis Arias as the worst, which also probably not true. So where are you on all the swing speed stuff right now? Is it just cool toys, or do you think there's some real stuff we can gain in terms of, making our fantasy teams better more quickly than we had in the past?
Yeah, as far as like actionable information from this, I'm not sure I would be confident in using it as like my a foundation for any decisions. it is definitely very, very, very cool and interesting that we can see these things, but we also kind of inherently knew things like Giancarlo Stanton can swing the bat very, very fast. I do think it could be interesting for kind of like bucketing hitters into types. Like you have the Luis Arias and Stephen Kwan. We know what type of hitters they are, what their strengths are, making a ton of contact, not necessarily hitting for power. And they show up at the bottom of like the average swing speed and swing length leaderboards. And maybe using those, you can see other hitters that are like them and kind of go from there. Or I think Freddie Freeman doesn't rate too well in the bat speed, but obviously we know Freddie Freeman is an extremely great hitter. So if you can maybe find a few other areas where a guy has Freddie Freeman's swing speed and a couple other behaviors like him, then maybe you can start to explain some of his production, even though it's not traditionally a great looking StatCast page or anything like that. But yeah, I am definitely waiting for both more data and measures to be released, and for more people smarter than myself to do research and telling me what we can take away from this.
I was hoping you wouldn't say that, because that's what I usually say, and I'm usually referring to you when I talk about that. So, man, who are we waiting on? Who do I need to have on this podcast next year to talk about swing length? There are plenty of people doing exciting stuff out there. You're doing some good stuff as well. You had an article a couple weeks ago in Baseball Prospectus called "In Defense of Isaac Paredes." That is a great example of looking at hitters who swing in unconventional ways, but who have success and trying to figure out how. I think just noting how similarly Paredes shows up next to Nolan Arenado was really significant, because if you look at some of the batted ball data, that has been the reason to believe in Isaac Paredes, for example. He is somebody who has very low hard hit metrics, but seems to consistently get to his power because he drops pulled fly balls just over the left field wall, just like Nolan Arenado. And it's really cool to see that, the results are similar. And guess what? Here's why. Their swings are really similar. So Isaac Paredes and guys like him, the slow swings and long swings, that seems like it would be so bad, but it actually works, right?
Yeah. So that was the first takeaway I had, like immediately that week. There was a few articles that went up that were kind of like, throwing up red flags on guys because they had slow bats and long swings. And, naturally that seems like a terrible combination for a hitter. You're right. Just on face value, normally you'd say that about a bad hitter, but these guys clearly make it work. And it turns out the swing length actually can tell us a lot about how a guy is trying to hit a ball, because it includes contact point in there. We just haven't been able to tease out the part that's just the contact point, which would be really interesting to look at.
Right.
But because it does include it, you can kind of figure out, work backwards from there. Really long swings are because guys are making contact very far out in front of where their swing starts. And that is exactly what guys who are trying to pull fly balls are shooting to do, is hit the ball like 1.5 to 2 feet out in front of the plate and yank it right inside the foul pole. And that's a whole class of hitters that's had a lot of success despite not really having Giancarlo Stanton's bat speed or exit velocities as used to look at. But Marcus Semien, one of these guys, Jose Altuve does it. So it could be a successful strategy, and they don't look great by these new metrics or the old ones, but it's definitely a plausible strategy for a lot of hitters.
So the main takeaway here is that I think a lot of the ways you could intuitively want to use bat speed are actually just going to make your fantasy teams worse if you're just saying, got to cut Isaac Paredes. Has there been any promising research that you've seen or done yourself that you think is hinting to where this is going to go and how people might be using it to make their fantasy teams better?
As far as fantasy goes, I don't know if I've seen any research yet.
That's a fair answer. I mean, the answer is that we're too early, right?
Yeah, it's only a couple weeks removed. It kind of takes some time to figure out what you're looking at whenever you get a new batch of data like this. It's humongous. I think I've seen some interesting attempts and had one myself at like kind of like 3D modeling a swing. I don't know how applicable it would be to fantasy because you might almost be getting into like pitcher versus hitter matchup stuff by then, and I don't know who goes that in depth into fantasy.
Right.
But teams certainly would have some use for that. But yeah, so we're still kind of waiting on some more ground to be broken there.
Right. I think the one that I'm waiting for is just once we get multiple seasons worth of data, right? Next April 15th, aren't you going to be writing an article saying, here are the players who have improved their bat speed the most, and here are the players who have lost the most bat speed? I mean, I know I am. I'm sure I'm not going to be the only one. That I could see as being pretty clearly useful for fantasy, right? That should be as useful as a pitcher has lost 2 miles per hour on their fastball. The batter's lost 2 miles per hour on his swing. Is it going to be that important next year at this time?
Yeah, I would imagine there'll come a time where we will have like a particular probably percentile swing number or something that we're looking at. And if a guy doesn't match up year over year, kind of like a max EV or something like that does for a hitter, then that'll be a sign that, there's decay there, or, this could even be relevant this year, sign of like an injury or something happening on like a rolling swing speed, guys playing through like an oblique injury or something. It's plausible that their swing could slow down a lot. And I did, you asked me for research. I did want to point out to the piece that Alex Chamberlain put up, I believe earlier this week. It was, I think it's the one titled something about daddy hacks, but it was looking into how the percentiles of swing speeds correlates like xWOBA and exit velocities. I think was very good and showed, it's not quite like a 90th percentile swing speed that is super important, I think, but like a little bit lower and correlates to contact rate and that kind of thing. But people should go check that one out. Sure.
Interesting. I will try to remember to put that one in the episode description. And that will hint at the direction that I think a lot of this exciting research is going to go. And we only have a few more minutes here, but let's finish the show by gloating about or discussing the first place Philadelphia Phillies, who happens to be a team that both Robert and I have watched a good amount over the course of our lives. How real is this, Robert? And that's what I want to ask. This is basically the same Phillies team we've seen for a couple of years. And I was used to this team being a solid, good wild card team. That was my expectation heading into the year. They didn't really make any changes. Everybody's a little bit older, so maybe this could be the beginning of the end, but probably it's going to be another wild card season. And instead, it's just been an incredibly uneventful best team in baseball. What's going on? I'm not used to this.
Yeah, it's a little unsettling if you're a Phillies fan.
Yeah,
like, this is what we do. This is what like the Braves and Dodgers do. But yeah, I think I'm most confident. Like the pitching has been like pretty much the best in the league, top to bottom, I guess. The starting rotation in particular, I think that's legitimate because all those guys you could say are good. We were kind of waiting to see what happened with Chris Sanchez, if there was any regression there or not. He looks better than ever almost. Like he was throwing 97 after throwing 95 pitches earlier this week. And that's from a guy who was sitting like 92 last year. So that was pretty impressive. Yeah, and we know the bullpen's full of fireballers. Starting rotation's good. I think that's legitimate. I don't know how long they'll keep getting supernova stretches from Edmundo Sosa, who's basically been Trey Turner while Trey Turner is out. That doesn't seem super sustainable, but
he's been Corey Seager, as we've discussed.
There you go. That's a nice nice way of circling back there. But yeah, I think it's a lot of the older hitters haven't taken big steps back yet. Like Realmuto looks better than he did last year. He looks like he did 2 or 3 years ago, actually. Schwarber's still Schwarber. Bryce is still Bryce. But then you've had guys like Stott and Bohm taking steps forward. So it's a little bit better on the whole, I think.
How much do you believe those steps forward? Maybe from Bohm in particular. I think Bohm is the one who's been getting the wider fantasy community the most excited. And every time I've tried to look under the hood, I don't see big changes. So I'm not totally sure I buy into him being all that different. And maybe he was just a little bit underperforming before and he's a little bit overperforming now. or am I too pessimistic here? And this is really the start of superstar Alec Boehm.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. He's going to have a little bit of variance with the way he is. It's a very BABIP friendly hitter, so there's going to be some hot and cold there. He has made some gains in swing decisions. It was a lot better earlier in the year. He's kind of cooled off a little, but just going by SEAGER, he went from 12.4 last year, which is a little bit below league average, to just about 15 this year, which is above, like a pretty decent amount above league average. So he's improved there. He's chasing less. He's always been an extremely gifted contact hitter. Hits the ball fairly hard. So I think those are sustainable skills. He still doesn't really hit for a lot of power, which would be great. So yeah, I think he's just going to be like a merely like good to very good contact hitter, but not like the superstar he was, where he was like up there with Ohtani and Mookie Betts for the first month of the year in production.
Right. Yeah, he does have his career best strikeout rate, 13.6%, but that's only a little bit better than last year's 15.4%. So maybe this is just, slight steps forward from a player in his age 27 season, and enough slight steps forward definitely make him a legitimately better player, even if, like you said, not quite Shohei Ohtani. We'll see if he can pitch, I guess. One other question on the Phillies. What do you think happens at the deadline? Because from the one hand, this has to be the year the team goes all in, right? If your biggest division rival in Atlanta lost the best hitter in baseball and the best pitcher in baseball,
right,
that's your year to go all in, especially with the Mets are, Metsing as hard as ever this year. Nobody else in the division has gotten good yet. And all these Phillies, they are kind of old. Every single one of the Phillies' best players, outside of, I guess, Alec Boehm, is between 31 and 34 years old. So guess what? Next year, they'll be 32 to 35. And after that, 33 to 36. It only goes in one direction. So there's a lot that I would think is pushing the Phillies to say, we got to go now, because our World Series odds are, 4 times as high this year as they're going to be next year. But there's also not a lot of holes in this team. What do you think the Phillies do? Do they just add an outfielder and combine Marsh and Rojas into a platoon in center? That's the only real hole I can see on the offensive side. Do they just add more pitching because everybody needs more pitching, even though the pitching's good?
Yeah, so I think my two biggest needs would be a right-handed bullpen arm, because Sir Anthony and Dominguez and Orion Kerkering have kind of been a little hit or miss at times, or just aren't like established too well like Kerkering is. Although they both look better in recent weeks, so maybe that's not as big of a need. But I think a right-handed hitting outfielder with some patience would do wonders for the lineup. The kind of elephant in the room of the Phillies lineup is Castellanos. His numbers are not pretty. It has been better. He got off to a god-awful start. It has been better over the last month, but it's still, he's not a great defender out there. Not really slugging the way you would like your $100 million corner outfielder to slug. And he strikes out a ton, and he's always chased a ton. So that may or may not improve. So yeah, like a Taylor Ward type of outfielder, I think would be perfect for this team. It would really round out the lineup. You could, do what you're saying with Marsh and Rojas. You can spell Castellanos, or just not be as dependent on him if he's in a humongous slump like he was in the NLCS last year. You do a lot of things there. But yeah, I think that's the biggest need. And they should go pretty aggressively at the deadline.
Taylor Ward makes a lot of sense. Maybe they can throw in, maybe Carlos Estevez does just enough that they can get him as the righty reliever too, or something. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't even help at all. I was thinking maybe a Tommy Pham, Michael Kopech double swoop or something. I don't know. Does that move the needle? It's an interesting one. I just don't know if the Phillies are going to go try to get a big piece, right? A lot of teams will try to add a frontline starter if they're trying to compete, but that would be, a fourth starter for the Phillies. I mean, right now their fourth starter is Christopher Sanchez. You're pretty happy with him in a playoff series. So unless somebody gets hurt, that's the most common way you can make your team a lot better heading into the playoffs, is to say, oh, well, our game 2 starter is now our game 3 starter, and our game 3 starter is now our game 4 starter. And hey, look, here's a new frontline arm. But I don't think the Phillies are going to do that, right?
Yeah, I can't see that. I can't see them spending a lot of resources for that. had deep playoff runs the last 2 years, pretty much riding the Wheeler, Nola, and Ranger trio in every playoff series. So Chris Sanchez was nominally their number 4 last year, and I think he only got into 1 playoff game. So I don't think you want to put Ranger Suarez in your bullpen. I mean, it'd be interesting. No. He's done it before, but I don't think that's the most efficient way to go about trying to improve the team.
Yeah, so we will see what they do. We'll see if it ends up being a Taylor Ward. I like that shout. That would be relatively exciting. Maybe it'll just be somebody less than that. But it's a strange position for us Phillies fans to be in, looking down on the rest of the league. But I don't mind. I wouldn't mind if they did this every year. That's going to do it. Yeah. Well, we'll see. How about every single season? Everything that I want to happen happens. Exactly. I would be okay with that. That's going to do it for today's show. And thank you, Robert. And hopefully you listeners learned a good deal about my favorite new stat, SEAGER. And hopefully we can help you figure out how to use it in your fantasy teams. Does your cat have anything to say there in the background?
He's probably wondering where his treats are. His food went off earlier, and he normally gets treats, so I don't know.
Well, I will let you get to that. Thank you so much for being my guest today. Robert, anything you'd like to plug on your way out?
I had a couple of pieces go up at Baseball Prospectus last week. One on Randy Arozarena's struggles, another one on Robert Suarez. I mean, we both know but Robert Suarez is pretty good, but, if you're interested in reading about him, they're both there on Baseball Prospectus.
Nice. Check that out. And you can follow Robert at Not the Bobby Orr on Twitter, where you can find his SEAGER stats and a whole lot more. Thanks again, Robert. Thanks to our sponsor, So Rare. And we'll be back tonight, Jeff and Scott, with the late Sunday show, wrapping up tonight's Fab.